Ready? Okay. Good morning. Thank you, those of you who are here at the Jockey Club Hall. As Executive Director of Asia Society Hong Kong, I want to welcome all of you this morning, a beautiful morning, and we're going to have our second of the Art for Breakfast series for this year. It's been over a year. I think this is one of the few live and hybrid events that Asia Society Hong Kong is hosting, starting about a month ago. So we're really, really delighted so many of you are here this morning, and I know others are joining us. And definitely grab the breakfast and enjoy. Go up on the roof and go and check out our exhibition, Extended Figures, the Art Inspirational Lalang, which is going to be with us for until after September. So we're really delighted that you guys can join us. And those of you online, thank you for joining us for our Art for Breakfast. And today we're going to really do an interesting tour of a studio in New York. So we're really thankful that Ghiora Aharoni is joining us. He's an interdisciplinary artist and designer. He's going to give us, talking about innovation out of New York studio. And with this global pandemic, it's hitting everyone. Including those artists in New York, and really badly hit. And we're Hong Kong very fortunate that we have an art fair, actually 2 art fairs going on, and Asia Society is over there. We are hosting. We're the education partner at Art Central, and there's a series of program over there the last couple of days and continues until tomorrow. So go if you're at Art Central, check us out. And you can also watch some of the program online as well if you're running around. And then, of course, we have a booth this year, thanks to Art Basel, at Art Basel Hong Kong. So check out our booth. And the booth, we're really profiling about 40, almost 50 Hong Kong artists, or our artists that are not all Hong Kong artists, but mostly Hong Kong artists that have donated their artwork for our art. June 8th, we're going to have a Asia Society Arts and Culture virtual gala, and the artists have donated their artwork, and we are featuring some of that in the Art Basel booth. And check us out. You can grab a catalog, and 50% of the proceeds from the art auction will go back directly to the artists. We feel it's very important in this time of the pandemic to also support the artists. All of us has been hit, but I think the artists especially. So please support us with in fact, the art auction is now online, and people have started bidding. So we're really, really excited. And the bidding, not just from here, thanks to the magic of technology like we are today, the bidders are coming from all over the world. And also, like today, our speaker is in New York, and we're here. And so that's the exciting part about art this year with the pandemic. With technology, we are moving in this new frontier of hybrid programming, online programming, and it's really exciting. We can still connect. So thank you all for being here. And also, please, tomorrow, we have tomorrow, another Art for Breakfast, our last one for this season. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about NFTs. I have no idea what it is, like many people, but I'm going to learn about it, more about it tomorrow, about NFTs from a local perspective. So join us tomorrow morning, those of you who can, either in person or online. And again, thank you for being with us. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to the technology and then come back and it's going to be a live Q&A, I think, with the artist himself. So hand it over. Janice, Sarah, thank you.
Giora's work really has a lot to do with challenging the concepts of linearity of time, religious implications, a lot of things that are very identity forming to us, our language, our cultural context, of course, our religious belonging. His work has been exhibited far and wide, and I will turn to my notes now to read this. His studio is in New York City, where we will be welcomed in a few moments. He started his studio for art and design there in 2004. I always said that my background is actually, I'm an art historian, my background is gallery life. I worked in a gallery for a very long time. And I dread talking about an artist while the artist is present, because you can never really do it justice. And it feels inadequate always. So, while I said things like it's interconnected, it's interwoven, it's boundaryless, and so on and so forth, in your words, would you introduce us to your practice and give us maybe a quick spin around the studio so we can get an idea of where we are?
Absolutely, with pleasure. But first, I would like to introduce you to a very vital part of my studio, which is Steven Estock.
Hi, everyone.
This is my studio director and right hand or left hand, depends on your... So, as Aurelia mentioned earlier, I founded my studio about 17 years ago. And I want to think of this place as a laboratory where we are examining time, text, and the way that cultures are connected. As Stephen will walk around the studio, you will see sculptures that are finished and some work in progress. What you see here is actually Park in Water, which is one of my favorite sculptures in the studio. You will encounter projects and objects from India, from Africa, and from other parts of the world, and from different eras of time. And each one has a particular narrative and energy that will become part of what I see as the larger conversation about how humanity is connected, which is something that is very much part of what the work that is currently on view at the Triennale at Asia Society is exploring. And, just to be sure that you believe us that we are in New York, this is the Empire State Building, which is the view through our studio skylights.
We had planned for this summer to come and visit you in New York for the opening of the Triennial. And there we already are on Andy's screen because, Ghiora, you did a really wonderful work that is on view at the Triennial. We can't travel there at the moment, but we would love to experience it here.
Yeah, so maybe we should start with the Triennale. What I like about starting the studio visit with this particular work is that it brings together aspects of time, text, and gender, which are elements that I use as a medium in my artwork. This particular work explores connections between gender and cultures by looking at languages and objects as very much signifiers. During the last decade, I've been incorporating melted languages into my work. You see here large-scale sculptures. I used Hindu, which is a melding of Hindi and Urdu, and Hebraic, a melding of Hebrew and Arabic. In both cases, the languages are linguistically related, but they are charged, they have very, very much a charged relationship, politically and culturally. For me, Hebrew and Hebraic speaks to histories of cultural plurality, and it opens a window onto the meaning of identity, from politics to gender. And I would say that by confronting the tension they sometimes evoke, my goal is to bridge the divide of otherness. What you see here is the installation that you cannot see, unfortunately, at Asia Society, at their museum on the third floor. Now, since we're not able to see this work, I think it would be wonderful if, Andy, we can share the short video that we made in the studio about the work.
The idea that we're all connected, that the fabric of humanity is inherently interwoven, is a theme that runs through much of my work. And it's an idea that I explore by shifting languages or objects into a new context that can expand our perspective about the ways that cultures and genders are threaded together. While working on an art project in India, I came across this antique garment, which at first I thought was a gown worn by a woman. After doing some research, I discovered it was an Angarka made from marmal, a traditional fabric that has an ethereal presence, and that it was a garment worn by both Hindu and Muslim men in pre-modern India. In my work, I've created combinations of languages that are metaphorical expressions of their intertwined cultural narratives, including Hebraic, a combination of Hebrew and Arabic, and Hindu, a melding of Hindi and Urdu. And as I began thinking about the Angarka's intercultural history, and also how the Angarka had blurred my perception of female and male, I wanted to channel those ideas into an exploration of gender across cultures and marry that feminine energy with the masculine identity of the Angarka. The phrase embroidered on the Angarka in Hindu and Hebraic is a modified version of the daily prayer that Orthodox Jewish men say, "Thank God for not making me a woman," where the word "not" has been removed, creating a transcultural veneration of women. The brooch is an assemblage I made by combining antique Indian, Christian, Jewish, and Islamic jewelry with prayer amulets as an expression of feminine vitality that transcends cultures. I wanted the sculpture to have an energetic presence and at the same time feel ephemeral, for its pose or gesture to be inviting, male yet also female, hovering between an embrace and a benediction that ultimately invites the viewer in.
That's such a wonderful work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ghiora. It's very beautiful. I think it's also really wonderful to see it in this film format because we can't really get into the texture of it otherwise, right? Like it's such a work that you want to experience in person. It's really.
I agree. It's like, when you see it in person, you understand the texture and the textile and how ephemeral it is, and it's a completely different experience.
Right. We will actually get to a few points that I've mentioned in the film later on, such as the use of language and the reassemblage of language, prayer, and so on. However, we've already taken a look at it. We have a particular treat here today because we are getting a first view onto something you made for the triennial benefit.
This is super, super exciting because you're actually the first one to see this monotype. It was just we literally in the process. You see some work that is in progress as part of the Triennale to support Asia Society. I created this limited series of their monotypes with the phrase "Thank God for making me a woman" in Hebrew and Hebraic. It is embroidered on sections of antique fulkari. So you're probably asking, what are these textiles, fulkaris? Yeah. Those are embroidered shawls, actually ceremonial shawls from very traditionally done in Punjab in North India, which are typically given as by the bride to her mother-in-law at the time of her marriage. I have a little bit of history of embroidering fulkaris. It was the topic of my first museum exhibition called Missives at the former Victoria and Albert Museum in Mumbai. The exhibition, to say a little bit about it, was inspired by the discovery of love letters written by my mothers in the 1950s as a young girl outside of Jerusalem. Both my parents passed away at an early age, so the discovery of these letters years after my mom passed, I kind of got to experience my mother as a teenager in love. And I began thinking about the universal nature of desire and courtship, as well as the collective experience that transcends time, geography, and also cultures. So as you can see in here, I had snippets of my mother's letters embroidered on the fulkaris. This is actually her handwriting. along with drawings of architecture and daily life that I observed while traveling throughout India over the past 20 years. So this work became like a kind of a conversation between two young girls, one in North India and one in Jerusalem, who lived in totally different eras and different continents, with myself as the intermediary. The two Furcaris that you see here on the table were supposed to be part of the Triennale, but it was reconfigured due to that pandemic. So this is the reason that I actually used the Furcari as my medium here. One last thing that I wanted to mention is that the benefit monotype will be available for sale during the second part of the Triennale to support Asia Society. A little detail, because I'm very much detail-oriented, you can see that I designed the frame as an homage to the looms that the Furcaris are traditionally embroidered on.
I think detail-oriented is an understatement. I think that's at the very core of your practice, the attention to detail, and that every part of it and every component carries a world of meaning. Thanks for showing us those. They're very beautiful and very meaningful. And now that you're already turning up the camera, can we keep going and look around a bit?
Absolutely. Perhaps I should start with Hindu and Hebraic.
Yes.
Those were first actually shown as large-scale wall sculptures that you saw in the slide before. We have several small-scale sculptures in the studio, and we have some work on paper that Stephen is pointing to. In the same way that Thank God for Making Me a Woman that you saw earlier explored gender relations across cultures, another phrase that I've created in Hindu and Hebraic is Make Me a Temple. That the version that Stephen is pointing to is the brass version in Hindu. And I wanted to use this phrase as a lens to explore humanity's shared desire to manifest spiritual connection and to contemplate how we do that.
Yeah.
The familiar King James translation of the Bible actually reads, "Make me a temple so I can dwell amongst you." Though a more accurate translation of the original Hebrew is, "Make me a temple so I will dwell inside you." Mm-hmm. While the King James translation suggests brick and mortar, the Hebrew phrase is more like an invitation to manifest spiritual energy within oneself. And the sculptures evoke a metaphorical meditation on humanity's collective desire for spiritual expression, which for me transcend what we call here in the studio belief systems. I know that, Aurelia, when we spoke earlier, you were particularly interested in the social relevance of this sculptures.
Yeah, exactly. When we spoke, or just generally thinking of your work and preparing for this talk, something that really stood out to me was this phrase or this prayer that is repeated, in its tradition on a daily basis. Thank God for not making you a woman. And you once said about it that you really explored and considered the notion of having this negative connotation. So thanking, but then at the same time thanking for not, it is a very strange thing, and it charges you if you repeat this on a daily basis with a very interesting energy that you and I had talked about. Would you mind elaborating a bit on that?
Yes. So I touched a little bit in the film about that phrase, and in particular the work that is at Asia Society. But I had a very personal relationship with that phrase, because as a young boy growing up, I grew up in a relatively secular household. However, liturgy, as much as it's part of our religion, it's more part of our culture. And I remember when I heard men reciting those prayers, I was struck by how can we progress for equality if we keep traditionally repeating that negativity for hundreds of years. So, and I came to the understanding that we have to critically look at our own religions, cultures, countries, and work through the issues and the traditions that actually create inhibitions.
Yeah.
So this is the reason that that this was created. There was always a phrase that Gandhi said that always stuck in my head: "Be the change that you want to see in the world."
Right.
So this is a manifestation of the change that I want to see in the world, starting with gender equality. I think that it would be nice, Stephen, to shift to actually what we're going to look at is actually the most recent complete work. And as I mentioned before, the sculpture "Make Me a Temple" was part of the inspiration for this body of work. That was first exhibited last year in 2020, the not great year that we should not talk about. It was shown last February at the India Art Fair in New Delhi, and the name of this work is "Make Me a Temple Within." Let me just tell you what you're looking at. You're looking at gaus. Gaus are portable shrines that are carried by Buddhist monks and pilgrims. Let me show you here. There is a small statue of the Buddha that is usually placed in the windows of the gao. And it has been placed. What I did is that I actually replaced it with a video montage that I created over the past few years of public devotion rituals of Buddhist monks. You can see them, if you slow down, Stephen, and some prostrating as they circumambulate pilgrimage sites in Nepal and India. It is very much interwoven with ambient sound, so if I'll be quiet a little bit, you might be able to hear it. And you can see some devotion rituals, and also the Hebraic sculpture "Make Me a Temple" that I travel with is popping in and out from the frame. The most important thing about this work is I wanted to create a visual mantra that embodied the cultivation of spiritual energy within, and also celebrate the act of internal rather than an external expression. Inverting the relationship between the shrine and the worshiper. If you go down a little bit, Stephen, and cascade to one of my favorite body of work, which is this is the body of work that I would like to share with you, that is about a universal nature of spiritual energy in the pilgrimage journey. It actually connects, Aurelia, to your very much interesting theology and architecture.
Yeah, when we spoke, this is probably, it's hard to say, but I think this might be my favorite work in a lot of ways. So I studied art history and theology, and places of worship infinitely interesting to me. I guess because they carry such energy of they're just eternal. They kind of feel like all the people that have been there in the years past us, and all the people that will come in the future, they're having a similar experience to what you're having. And I feel like these places of worship are really manifestations of that. And this work is particularly enchanting. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
Sure. So the name of this work is, if we haven't mentioned, is The Road To Sanji. And it's an addition of 36 sculptures that employs pilgrimage journeys to 4 sacred sites in India for 4 different belief systems as a vehicle to explore the fluidity of time. So time here is a very, very important element. It's actually 2 things that we battle with here in the studio: time and distance. And also the interconnected nature of cultures. The Ruby Museum, actually, this was shown at the Ruby Museum, and they commissioned a film about the work.
Go going to interrupt you because I know you wouldn't jubilate for yourself there, but I have to express a massive congratulations here, because this work was just acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is fantastic and well-deserved and just absolutely wonderful. Congratulations, Ghiora.
Thank you very much. We're still hyperventilating about this.
Bet.
Thank you.
Well-deserved.
Thank you.
One of the notions that I'm looking to challenge in my work is the idea of linear time. And a pilgrimage in particular allows us to experience time in a different way. We're participating in a ritual which so many have done before us and so many will do after us. And at that moment, linear time collapses. The past, the present, and the future all exist equally. And you shift into an alternative realm of time. The Road to Sanji is an installation of 12 sculptures where I've taken obsolete taximeters from India and transformed them with video screens on both sides. So each becomes an oculus that documents rickshaw rides I made to 4 sacred sites in India for Buddhists, Jews, Muslims, and Hindus. Sanchi, where part of the Buddha's ashes were buried in 3rd century BC. Matanchari, which has the oldest continuously operating synagogue in India, the Paradesi Synagogue, which was built in the 1500s. Nizamuddin, the Dargah of the 13th century Sufi saint in Delhi, and Varanasi, also known as Benares, one of India's oldest and most holy cities, where the Hindu ritual of Aarti is performed on the banks of the Ganges every morning and evening. And each of these sites possesses an energy that you feel and to which you can connect. I've been documenting these pilgrimages for over a decade now. During one of my rides, the utilitarian function of the rickshaw meter, which was to measure time and distance of a journey, took on a new meaning. It became an object inscribed with the metaphorical energy of thousands of journeys. And now that the analog meters have been outlawed and replaced with digital versions, I wanted to transform it, to bring it back to life in a non-conventional way, to shift its perception in the eyes of the viewer. So I replaced the numerical dials that represented the time, distance, and cost of reaching your destination with videos of my rides to the pilgrimage sites, where you only see the road to, never the actual pilgrimage site. So it becomes about the wonder of the journey rather than the destination. I wanted to animate this inanimate, obsolete object and activate the energy it contains as an artifact, and then create a new context for it under a glass dome that is a blur between a time capsule and the silhouette of the stupa. The installation itself is designed as an invitation to the viewer to move through the space, to circumambulate the sculptures, almost to create a ritual connection to the work. My practice includes both art and design, and I'm interested in how a shift in context can allow us to question our perspective or reconsider its significance. The Golden Rickshaw Meter, entitled When All Roads Are One, is merging the films of individual pilgrimage rides to Sanchi, Nizamuddin, Varanasi, and Matanchari into one vivid progressive journey where cross-cultural pilgrimage paths become one, and the destination remain unseen. Converting the films from color to black and white blurs the boundaries between day and night, the urban and rural, past and present, By encasing the utilitarian meter in gold, it is transformed into a modern-day reliquary. But instead of a sacred relic inside, there is a panorama of pilgrimages that cross cultures. This enduring cultural plurality is inspiring to me, especially now when exclusionist movements are gaining traction around the world. The Road to Sanji invites us to reconsider our notions about time, to think about time as fluid rather than linear. It's also a meditation on coexistence and the universal threads that unite cultures.
What a great work. And here we go. I was just about to say, we have to be mindful of time. And there's still one work that we really want to see, which we're approaching now. Ghiora, when you took me on the tour there the first time, that was definitely the one work where I was like, I would love to see that in person. I think no matter how much we get the camera in there, we won't be able to really grasp its physical presence.
I agree with you.
Explain what marvel is.
It's going to take more than 5 minutes to explain this, but I'll try to do my best. If I mentioned earlier that time and text are medium of my artwork, this series exemplifies that. What you're looking at is the Genesis series in a body of work from that was inspired by the biblical story of creation, which I began working in about, I would say, 2012, as a way to examine dialogue between science and religion. This is a series of 7 assemblage sculptures inspired by the 7th day of creation and described by the book of Genesis, which explores the concept of creation as a dialogue between science, which thinks of creation as fact-based, and religion, which is faith-based. So in each of the sculptures, I've juxtaposed, you're looking at vintage laboratory equipment, clamps, beakers, and flasks, most of which are engraved with the Genesis text in Hebrew. The religious, you can see some religious iconography, such as antique Torah crown and Torah finials, from all over the world, with icons from the Genesis text, such as trees, birds, and representation also of Adam and Eve. You can find them somewhere in there, I swear. I wanted to create a metaphorical conversation between man-made and God-made, like the empirical versus religious belief, which is the sculpture for me embodies by the presence of light, which represents both rational light of scientific truth and divine illumination. Now, we know that creation did not stop after those first 7 days. So the questions that I'm asking via this work is, what happens on the 8th day? In a way, I'm claiming and understanding that the baton was passed to us. And I wanted to express humanity's ongoing engagement with creation. And also it comes with a lot of responsibility. And the idea that creation is dynamic, sort of an ongoing, let's call it divine experiment, that we continue to change and evolve. And that is something that I feel more than ever in the time that we're living in. We're constantly evolving as the world is shifting around us. Yeah. So when I first finished the first 7 sculpture, each sculpture was an entire universe on its own, and each sculpture was representing a day in creation.
Yeah.
And when I finished the first 7, I actually mixed them all up. So you can see elements from the first day appear in the 5th day, text from the 4th day appear in the 2nd day, and so on. And this is my commentary on the act of creation. And also, I'm just going to touch and throw it on the table, and about the segmentation of time. that we were divided into, creation was divided into 7 days. Now, this work looks like it is complete. For Stephen, it is complete, but he keeps seeing me here constantly tweaking and changing it. And Stephen's line is like, the work is only complete when it leaves the studio.
Yeah, I get that. I have worked with so many artists who are like, when do you know it's done? I think that's always a pressing question, right? You just decide it's done, I guess.
Yes.
This sculpture has been exhibited far and wide. Venice Biennial in 2016, Jerusalem Biennial in 2017, and in Amsterdam in 2019. I think it's very fascinating that you're saying you're bringing these two realms together. You know, can you elaborate a little bit more on that, the dialogue that's there?
I'm going to be very brief about this because it's lovely to say today that I'm referring to this work as the dialogue between science and religion, but if you look at the text that is 10 years old on the wall, my thesis started with the conflict between religion and science. But it seems that the rhetoric has changed to the dialogue between religion and science, and I'm going to give you one anecdote. There are many of them. But one anecdote is that at MIT, at their media lab, in the past 10 years, they're exploring the information that is embedded in the spoken word. And they very, very briefly discovered that the vibration and sound that comes in the spoken word is actually a creative act, a creative energy. And why am I telling you this story is that everything that was created in the book of Genesis, God did not take matter and create things. Actually, it was through the spoken word. And with one, and God said, let there be light. So the word as a creative energy.
Yeah. In medieval paintings, or, you know, throughout the Middle Ages, when there's the Annunciation to Maria, the angel's words.
Correct.
Right? Also, so this carries through a very, very long time. The gravitas of the spoken word and the creative energy of it is very important. Ghiora, I know we're almost sort of through there, right? If I'm getting the lay of the land right.
Not really. Absolutely not. It's actually you can do many rounds here and keep discovering. But there's one last sculpture that I thought we would look at before we wrap it up, and it's called the Tablet, and that was produced in your hometown in Zurich in Switzerland. It's an edition of 4 sculptures. This is the sculpture that Adrian mentioned earlier that is in the Vatican collection. There is one that is in New York in the Morgan Library collection, and it was just acquired by the National Gallery in Washington. So it was inspired by this little friend in here, which is called the cuneiform. The cuneiform is one of the oldest form of writing, and so you can see that the shape is actually very much related. The commission was for create a sculpture that will encase one of the most sacred books in Jewish mysticism, which is the correction to the Zohar. The correction to the Zohar are 70 commentaries about the book of Genesis. So even if you come closer, you will see that what I did is that it's a text-based, again, work. So I carved a solid block of aluminum with the text of Genesis. But if you look at the text, you would say like there's something really odd in here. What I did is that I make each word touch each other and created a continuous swell up to this part, which is the only word that you can read, which is the light. The book inside here is the book of illumination. What I wanted to say is that, again, for me, time is collapsing here because I'm creating an encasement, a modern reliquary encasement of one of the oldest book in Jewish mysticism. So let me just open it for you so you will see how the actual so you can see that the text is actually carved through the box. One last thing that I would say about this is that there is a lock-in mechanism for this box, and it's a 4-letter word that says "Vayehi," which means "let there be," and it comes from the phrase "let there be light." And this lock-in mechanism is actually resting in 4 corners of the box, and then the second half is coming in and locking the book into safety.
It's so. I really love it. Ghiora, thank you so much.
I hope you enjoy that wonderful tour. I certainly did. Good morning, Ghiora and Stephen. I'm Alice. I'm so glad to see both of you. And it's good morning for us and good evening for you. I know you guys are joining us live. And I'm really delighted that we can be here today and to see that wonderful interview and the tour. I'm going to get started with a Q&A. And we also have questions from Slido, and we're also going to see questions from the audience as well. Okay, and we have about half an hour, and I hope you guys will, and there's about 20 of us here in the audience, and I know there's a lot of people online. I want to get started by asking you. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to take off my mask. I think we're okay, right?
Okay with us. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, gosh, what a great, and I wish I was at Asia Society to see the triennial. I know we were planning on it, but what inspired your work? You talk about time, but what has time meant to you this year of the pandemic?
It's such an amazing question that I'm still writing about it because I still don't know what day it is. The malleability of time was accentuated to a point that the sense of the present time became like so vivid to me. One of the most magnificent thing is when we closed the studio with the advent of COVID and we knew that we're not going to be here. We did not know for how long. I worked from home and I stayed at home, and this was the first time ever that I noticed a tree from being bare to actually sprouting so I was doing my meditation and yoga every day in front of the tree in my backyard at home. And I said, what a privilege, what a gift it is to sit in front of a tree and to see it growing. I think that summarizes time for me. The idea that the extent of the present time was for me extended. I felt like that this year gave us a couple of years of thinking, of being alone, of pausing, which is something that we do not do. What does it mean to pause? So I'm very hesitant to say that, and I feel very comfortable because I only see you, so I feel it's very intimate. So I'm only having this conversation with you, and nobody else will hear us. But I truly enjoyed this gift of time that COVID gave us. It gave us horrible things, but at the same time, I was not spared. I was very, very sick. At the very, very early in March for a very good 2.5 weeks. So it's not that I cruised through COVID without it touching me. And at the same time, it gave me another very, very big gift that I will continue with this idea of pause that.
Well, your work, it deals with faith and science quite a bit, right? And so in some ways this year I've, we've had losses and I've been thinking about that quite a bit, faith and science. Thanks to science, we're getting our vaccine and the research has accelerated. But, the losses you talked about and so the faith. So talk about that, your work. How has all of that started in terms of your identity? Kind of what made you, and the kind of the work you do is this cross-cultural, crossing so many boundaries. So kind of talk about that a little bit.
Wow. So boundaries is something that I like to erase. In order to study, not necessarily for the act of erasing boundaries is an act for me of research. It's something that I'm doing a control environment in the studio, and I love erasing physical boundaries between countries. I love erasing boundaries with languages, and it wasn't planned, but I kind of started erasing the line between science and religion. As I mentioned in the interview, when I started working on Genesis, its thesis was the conflict between religion and science. When you read sagas, when you read any form of religious text and you read science today, you understand that there's no correlation between them. But the more we study the text to depth and the more science evolve, those two points are actually getting to a point that they're meeting. And I'm just an observer of this, and I actually truly enjoy to see my work that I feel that is very solid that becomes completely something different. And I think I gave the example. I shouldn't repeat it. The example in the film about the spoken word and about how scientists today understand that the spoken word is creative energy, physically creative energy, and how in the book of Genesis, everything that got created was through the spoken word. And we thought it was simply a form of a poetic form of expression and writing at the time. But now we understand that there's something more into it.
So I kind of want to turn this to Stephen a little bit, and also you. This is not the kind of artist studio that I expect. It looks almost like a lab, like a technology. It's like a scientific lab. You're like Mr. Frankenstein inventing things. So tell me about the lab and how you generally, how many people are working in there. I mean, it is a laboratory. Is that obviously by design, because your medium is not paints and well, even the embroidery. So I'm curious about the lab structure of your studio.
This is also, we both share this thought, it's a laboratory of ideas. And that happens in many ways that, in addition to the work that Ghiora is creating here, which is, there's the sculpture, there's the embroidery work, so there's art, but there's also design. And those two things actually inform each other. So that when we talk about it being a laboratory for ideas, there are the ideas that come from the studio or Ghiора's work, but it's also how these two disciplines can actually work in tandem to make something creative or something more interesting in each of them. And we're a studio of 4 people, which we are intentionally.
Including us.
Including the 2 of us. And the idea is that we never want it to be larger than that with maybe one or two other freelance people, because we always want to be in touch, very much in touch, and a part of the process. And once you get larger than that, it shifts to managing projects rather than participating in them. So, and on the flip side of that, the studio also functions as a place where people come together. And this is obviously pre-COVID, where we would have book parties, lectures, poetry readings, text studies. And it was a hub for, it was like a salon for ideas for the people in New York.
And how has that changed this year? I mean, with it closing, have you also kind of moved online like this, or not being? I think New York in the beginning was hit quite about a year ago was hit quite a bit, and now it seems to me, having just been in the States, in the East Coast, things are coming back. But how have you been connecting with with being at home this last year?
We've done a lot of virtual studio visits. Yeah. It used to be, as we mentioned, there were curators, collectors, journalists who would come through to look at the work and talk to Ghiora, and that has totally shifted to a virtual experience. I would say within the past 2 months, right? Yeah. More or less, we've begun having small studio visits, especially with the advent of vaccinations in New York. If the people we're both totally vaccinated, and people who are coming here, if they're vaccinated and they're comfortable, it works. And I think that trend will continue as more and more people get vaccinated. So we're seeing in New York and in our studio kind of return to in-person meeting. But on the other hand, we're still doing virtual events like this. Part of this is because of geography, but we also have another one that's coming up in next month with Israel, for example. So there are, in some ways, it actually has opened things up. Exactly. Because before, someone like in Hong Kong, they would say, okay, we're going to do things locally. And now it actually allows us, or gives the ability to think a bit more globally, because we are used to this technology.
Well, I think nothing can replace face-to-face direct, I think. And we're hoping here in Hong Kong that people get fully vaccinated so that we can have global visitor. I think in Hong Kong, the numbers are very low, but there's nothing beats, that international, Hong Kong is such a small city. So we're hope to have welcome you both here in person in the near future. But right now, with 15% vaccination rate compared to the States, it's almost 50, and I think Israel is 80. We're kind of far behind there. But this week we are having a wonderful gathering, the art fair, which has been a lot lively, and then the art for breakfast here. So we're really, on a flip side of it, Hong Kong has been very fortunate compared to what's happening around the world. So in some ways, I'm going to turn it. Any question from the audience? Please.
Hi. So just kind of, I guess I have two questions, but first, just kind of keeping in the theme of this, virtual conferences. When I was watching the video, the way kind of the art was presented was different than it would be if I was there in person. You don't see the textures or how it occupies space and stuff, but there was also some stuff that was almost positive, like you were interacting with the art and it was being explained while we were kind of looking at it. So has any of this kind of made you think about how to communicate differently once the world kind of goes back to normal? Or is it mostly just kind of, well, let's just go back to normal and kind of proceed to how it was before?
I thank you for that question. I want to answer no, go back to normal. I think that I'm very much an advocate that we really, something happened to us and we need to rethink. But to answer your question about the physicality of the studio, nothing can replace it. And what's really interesting about the studio, and again, as a laboratory, is that when you come the first time, you will see one thing, and you'll come the second time, you'll say, oh, that was not here when I was here before, and it was. Or or maybe it wasn't, but the interaction with, and also the tactile is very, very important. When people are coming and seeing Genesis, I'm actually encourage them to touch the glass and to feel the engraving in the glass, and that's the only way that one can understand the amount of work that goes into it, and to actually have the appreciation of the craftsmanship that goes into it. So I don't know if I will change the way that that we interact with the work, but I would certainly add elements like the videos, which we did not have before, to actually extend the breadth of the work.
I also think that, we've always been cognizant that, especially because Ghiora has exhibited all over the world, that there's an international audience that would like to see the work that can't come to New York. And we have on Vimeo, we have a channel, and also on Instagram, we post videos of the work, because that, for us, seems to be the best way to convey work to people who aren't able to come see it in person, either in our studio or when it's being exhibited. For example, the Asia Society Triennial, we created that video because, and Asia Society here was very happy because they knew that many people would not be able to come. And particularly the sculpture, which is a three-dimensional work, that it was a way for people to have as close as you can get to an in-person experience. So that's, I think, part of the reason why we always make video and we make them public through social media.
I want to add one more thing, is that the interview was conducted with Switzerland. We literally just landed an hour and a half ago from Iceland, while we were filming their footage for the next generation of the Genesis series, including the erupting volcanoes and the melting of the glaciers. So arriving here in an hour to actually engage with this, I mean, it's magnificent. I mean, there are so many segments of times that are collapsing into present time, and
Well, we're grateful that you made it. And in fact, yesterday I got an email from my colleague saying there could be a delay. So thanks to, I mean, right now, not a lot of people are traveling, so flight delays are rare. So we're really happy that you made it to be with us this morning. And I guess this leads me, I mean, we only have a few more minutes to the last, well, I actually have two questions. And I have to ask kind of this question, because this month in the United States and here at Asia Society, we're all in Hong Kong, also are commemorating Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. But this is also a year ago we saw the division. We saw it's almost a year ago that George Floyd incident and the beginning of Black Lives Matter, and you also touch upon the gender equality, the Me Too. So with this year of division, not just pandemic, but what's happening in the U.S., but not just the U.S. Look at what's happening in the Middle East right now as well. And so, and you talk about your work as connecting humanity. Are you? And then maybe this will lead to my last question about your current work that you came back from Iceland from. What have, besides COVID but this year of division and all of the kind of the sadness, I mean, I'm sure we're going to be hearing, unfortunately, some of these things are not going away. But how do you think art can play a role? I mean, you have talked about this, in the video beautifully, but that division, and it's in many ways violent. How do you hope your work can kind of lead to some sort of discussion? And my favorite quote is a fabric of humanity, and showing the video of the fabric. So can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I think I look at art as a language that allows us to speak in a different voice. You can have 10 politicians scream at us what's right and what's wrong, and one work of art that can fix it. So I think that the role of critical thinking in art is incredibly important. So I just know that my task as an artist and a designer grew in the past year with much heavier responsibility to actually respond to those issues and to bring also comfort. Yeah, I'm. This is also the reason that we decided to continue, and this is something that is very very intense, because we came back from Iceland, and we went to Iceland because of several reasons, but the main reason is that I'm starting to look at COVID as in a form of a genesis, as something that was just created, and to actually hone our lens and to see what does it mean. So I went to a place where lava is coming from deep in the earth, and I'm trying to connect this to this particular virus. I don't know how I'm doing it and what I'm doing with it, but I'm just sharing with you our thoughts.
And I also think that, part of what, this is how I see what Ghiora's work is doing, is that it's not prescriptive. Right. It actually is a place for someone to ruminate on a question, which is, the work that was in the Asia Society training, which you mentioned about this fabric of humanity, is this idea that interweaving languages may, and one hopes, place in people's minds this idea that, these languages at one time were connected or come from the same root, and these cultures are connected, and it starts a thought process that is not hitting them over the head, it's inviting them to stop and think about it, and that's how I think people's minds can be changed.
Great. And I think on that note, I think we're running out of time. But I want to thank you both for this really wonderful morning. Regardless of where we are, we can still be together and share idea. And I love this critical thinking of art. And because we here in Hong Kong, there is a growing, we're kind of behind in New York in terms of some of the art ecosystem. But the other day, I just visited the beautiful M+, which is coming on board in a few months. The space is magnificent. It's going to be, I think, going to be bigger than MoMA and Tate Modern, and it's a beautiful building. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. I know there's been a lot of talk about some of the controversy, but I think I'm really, and Asia Society here in Hong Kong, we've been here now almost 10 years, ahead of the curve a little bit, but we're really delighted that we can bring you programs like this morning and continue. So that's why I really look forward to welcoming you both to Hong Kong when you don't have to go through the quarantine that I went through. I went through a 3-week quarantine, so a different perspective of time. But when you do come now, hopefully it's going to be 2 weeks or less with the vaccination, everybody getting vaccinated. But thank you both, and we really do look forward to welcoming you to Hong Kong in the not too distant future. And I want to thank the online audience as well as our audience here with us for this morning's Art for Breakfast. Definitely a lot of food for thought we're going to take away with us this morning. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you for joining with us. From your trip, and and those of you who are going to the art fair, check out for Asia Society booth at Art Basel, and also more programs like this at Art Central at the Asia Society Theater. And so have a wonderful weekend. Thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you.